Baltimore and Ohio Lafayette. In a world that assumed a locomotive needed as many wheels as possible, William Norris proved everyone wrong with just two. Built in 1837 for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the Lafayette used a 420 wheel arrangement, 4 leading wheels, and a single pair of drivers. It weighed about 14,400 pounds and generated roughly 15 horsepower. But its design was revolutionary. Outside cylinders, a swiveling 4-wheel pilot truck, and drivers positioned ahead of the firebox to maximize weight on the powered axle. It was the Baltimore and Ohio's first horizontal boilered locomotive and possibly the world's first standardized production model. A year earlier, Norris had made headlines when as George Washington climbed the Belmont Inclined Plane in Philadelphia, hauling 19,200 pounds up a grade at 15 miles per hour, the first locomotive to ascend a hill under its own power. European engineers refused to believe it. Norris 420s were exported to England in 1842 for the Lickey Incline after British builders declined the challenge. By the 1840s, roughly 2/3 of all American locomotives were 420s. The type faded once the 440 took over, but the blueprint Norris drew in 1837 outlived every engine he ever built. Shay geared locomotive. Ephraim Shay was a Michigan logger, not an engineer, and that is exactly why he built a locomotive no engineer would have imagined. In the 1870s, Shay needed a machine that could haul timber on rough temporary tracks through steep mountain forests where conventional side rod locomotives simply derailed. His answer was radical: vertical cylinders mounted on the right side of the boiler, driving a flexible horizontal shaft that ran the full length of the locomotive. That shaft turned bevel gears on every axle, meaning every wheel was a driving wheel. The boiler was offset to the left to balance the cylinder weight. Shays could climb grades steeper than 5% and handle curves tight enough to derail anything conventional. The trade-off was speed, 18 miles per hour top, thanks to a 2.53 to 1 gear ratio. But in dense forests and mountain mines, speed was irrelevant. Lima Locomotive Works built the entire run, 2,770 shays between 1880 and 1945, in 4 classes from 6 tons to 162 tons. They were exported to Canada, Mexico, Australia, and Taiwan. Over 115 survive today, and 18 remain operational at tourist railroads. Not bad for a machine designed by a man who just wanted to get his logs down the mountain. The Holman horror. Not every unusual locomotive was genius. Some were outright fraud. In 1887, William Jennings Holman built a locomotive in Philadelphia with stacked wheels. Smaller wheels sitting on top of the regular driving wheels, connected by gears. He claimed this would multiply speed to impossible levels. It did nothing of the sort. Angus Sinclair, publisher of railway and locomotive engineering, called it a humbug from day one. He was right. Holman was not building a better engine. He was selling stock. The Holman Locomotive Speeding Truck Company was capitalized at $10 million, offering shares at $25 each, promising the future of rail travel. The locomotive ran a few test trips on a straight track in New Jersey, just enough to lure investors. Many people with limited savings lost everything. Railroad men pointed out the stacked wheels, made the engine dangerously top-heavy, increased wheel slip, and introduced dozens of gear points that would inevitably fail. Then Holman did it again. In 1897, he convinced Baldwin to build a second version. It failed just as spectacularly. Both were eventually rebuilt as conventional engines and lived out quiet, ordinary careers. The Holman horror remains one of the greatest stock swindles in American railroad history. Heilmann Locomotive. In the 1890s, French engineer Jean-Jacques Heilmann asked a question no one else was asking. What if a steam locomotive did not need pistons connected to its wheels at all? His answer was La fusée électrique, the electric rocket. Patented in 1890 and first built in 1893, it used a balanced steam engine to drive a generator, which powered 8 traction motors mounted directly on the axles. No side rods, no cranks, no hammer blow. It was the world's first thermoelectric locomotive. The same concept behind every diesel electric running today, 50 years ahead of its time. The prototype weighed about 110 tons and rode on two 4-axle bogies. Its wedge-shaped nose gave the crew forward visibility decades before that became standard. Two larger versions followed in 1897 for the Chemins de Fer de l'Ouest, carrying a 12-cylinder compound steam engine, 6 pairs of tandem cylinders acting on 6 cranks. The first 6-crank steam engine ever produced. They covered over 1,180 miles on the Paris to Mons line. But 1890s, electrical technology could not keep up. Performance was mediocre, and the project was abandoned. Yet every diesel electric in the world today, burn fuel, make electricity, drive motors, follows the blueprint Heilmann drew over 130 years ago. Erie Triplex. If 2 sets of driving wheels are good, 3 must be better. That was the logic behind the Erie Railroad's Triplex, the only locomotive ever built with a 28882 wheel arrangement. Designed by George Henderson at Baldwin and delivered in 1914, the first was numbered 2603 and named the Matt H. Shay. It had 3 sets of 8 driving wheels, 24 powered wheels in total, including a set under the tender. Tractive effort exceeded 176,000 pounds, but the Triplex had 2 fatal flaws. First, only half the exhaust went through the smoke box, which starved the firebox draft and made steam generation hopelessly inadequate. Above 10 miles per hour, the locomotive literally ran out of breath. Second, as the tender burned through its coal and water, the rear driving wheels lost weight and adhesion, meaning the engine grew weaker as it worked. Baldwin had predicted it could haul 600 car freight trains. Reality was far more modest. 3 triplexes were built for the Erie. A fourth, a 28884 numbered 700, went to the Virginian Railway in 1916 and was dismantled by 1921. Erie scrapped its 3 between 1929 and 1933. Only 4 were ever built, and none lasted more than 19 years. Southern Pacific cab forward. Look at any steam locomotive. The cab is in the back, behind the boiler. Now look at this one. The Southern Pacific cab forward put its crew at the front, ahead of the smoke box, ahead of everything. It looked like it was running backward. There was a very good reason. SP's Sacramento division crossed the Sierra Nevada, 150 miles of grades, up to 2.5%, through 39 tunnels and nearly 30 miles of snow sheds. When SP tested its first Mallet 2882s on this route in 1909, exhaust filled the enclosed spaces with heat and poisonous gases, making conditions nearly unbearable for the crew. SP's fix was simple. Turn the entire locomotive around, cab at the front, firebox at the rear. This only worked because Southern Pacific burned oil, not coal. Oil could be piped from the tender to the firebox regardless of direction. 256 cab forwards were built, the largest cab forward fleet in history. The final AC-12S of 1944 carried 63-inch drivers, 250 pounds per square inch, and 124,300 pounds of tractive effort. Engine and tender stretched about 125 feet and weighed over 1 million pounds. The last one built, number 4294, survives at the California State Railroad Museum, the only preserved cab forward in existence. PRRS-1. The Pennsylvania Railroad's S-1 was not just unusual, it was excessive. Completed January 31, 1939, and numbered 6,100, it was the longest rigid-frame reciprocating steam passenger locomotive ever built. 140 feet from nose to tail. Engine weight alone was 608,170 pounds. Its Art Deco shell was designed by Raymond Loewy. The S-1 was the only locomotive in history to use a 6-4-4-6 wheel arrangement, a duplex with 2 sets of 4 driving wheels on a single rigid frame. Drivers measured 84 inches. Boiler pressure was 300 pounds per square inch. Tractive effort reached 76,400 pounds. The S-1 debuted at the 1939 New York World's Fair, spinning on rollers at full speed for visitors. In testing, it reached over 100 miles per hour, pulling a 1,350-ton passenger train. But the S-1's strength was its fatal weakness. It was too long. Its rigid frame could not negotiate the curves on most of the PRR's own track. It derailed repeatedly. Wheel slippage made it unreliable even on straight runs. Only one was built. It cost $669,780, served barely 10 years, and was scrapped in 1949. Chesapeake and Ohio M-1. By the late 1940s, diesel was winning the war against steam, but the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway was not ready to surrender. Coal was its lifeblood. So Chesapeake and Ohio partnered with Baldwin and Westinghouse to build a coal-fired steam turbine electric locomotive. The M1 burned coal to produce steam, which spun a Westinghouse turbine, which drove 4 DC generators, which powered 8 traction motors on the axles. No pistons, no side rods. It was a power plant on wheels. 3 were built, numbers 500, 501, and 502, delivered between 1947 and 1948. Each produced 6,000 horsepower from the turbine. Engine weight was 857,000 pounds. Overall length reached 154 feet, the longest single-unit locomotive in the world at the time. The boiler sat at the rear, and the coal bunker at the front. The tender carried 25,000 gallons of water and 29 tons of coal. They were built to haul the Chesapeake, and Ohio's post-war streamliner at 100 miles per hour. But the Chessie never entered service. The M1s proved mechanically unreliable and expensive to run. Crews nicknamed them sacred cows. All 3 were retired in 1949 and scrapped in 1950, just 3 years after they were built. PRRT1. After the S1 proved too big, the Pennsylvania Railroad returned to Baldwin for a locomotive that could work in daily service. The T1 was a 4-4-4-4 duplex, 2 independent sets of cylinders on a single rigid frame. 2 prototypes were built in 1942, followed by 50 production units in 1945 and 1946, the largest duplex order ever placed. Raymond Loewy designed the streamlined shell with its shark nose profile. Drivers measured 80 inches. Boiler pressure was 300 pounds per square inch. Tractive effort reached 64,700 pounds. In testing, the T1 hit over 100 miles per hour, pulling 1,350 tons on level track. The duplex reduced hammering on the rails, but introduced a devastating problem: violent, uncontrollable wheel slip. Each set of small drivers carried less weight, and the Franklin poppet valve system made throttle response unpredictable. Engineers reported wheels suddenly spinning at speed, even on straight level track. A 2008 study suggested the slippage was partly caused by failure to properly train crews transitioning to the T1, but by then it was too late. In 1948, the PRR declared diesel would replace steam on all express passenger trains. Every T1 was scrapped by the early 1950s. None survived. It was the last steam locomotive the Pennsylvania Railroad ever built, and the most controversial. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, share it around, and I'll catch you in the next one.